Hi everyone, Claire Rattée here. We're in the last few days of the election here, so I just wanted to make a quick video talking about a couple of topics that are in the news right now, saying that Conservatives are going to cut services and that we are only removing so much money from our budgetary spending and giving it back to Canadians, which I'm not sure when that became such a bad thing, because we're going to cut services, and that is simply untrue. I have done a previous video that goes on into this in a bit more depth. So feel free to watch that one as well. But basically, we have absolutely committed to not only maintaining current levels of funding for transfers to the provinces for healthcare spending and for social programs, but we've also guaranteed that we will be increasing that amount of funding. So just to draw a little bit of a parallel to how simple it is for us to actually cut money from our budgets without Canadians feeling that impact. When we look at Justin Trudeau and the amount of money that he has spent on food and alcohol on his various flights, through just 5 flights that he's taken alone in the last 4 years of him being our Prime Minister, he spent $348,000 on food and alcohol. It's absolute insanity. This is not why people become public servants. It's not about some kind of fancy status and all of the food and alcohol and throwing parties and whatever. This is about getting the job done for Canadians and always keeping Canadians first. Another thing is looking at the way that they mismanage money when it comes to really ridiculous things like their cover art for their budgetary plan. So they spent $212,000 that they paid to an advertising agency to create this fancy cover art for their budget. To put it in perspective, the previous Conservative government spent around $600 doing that. So $600,000 to $212,000. Part of that $212,000 was even paid to models that were hired to depict middle-class Canadians, and that was $89,500. So it's pretty simple to see why a Conservative government is just more responsible with your money, and we can really very simply make some of these cuts and nobody's going to feel an impact to services. So what's being put out in the news right now around that is just absolutely false. So talking more about what our government can do for you as an everyday Canadian to help you get ahead, we've already made lots of announcements around reducing the rate of the lowest income tax bracket, making a universal tax cut. Again, I've spoken a fair bit about that in a previous video, canceling $1.5 billion in corporate welfare, and from a small business perspective, which is what I really want to talk about, because obviously that's important to me as a small business owner. It's part of the reason why I ran in this election. It's part of the reason why I ran in the municipal election in Kinema, is to encourage small business development and to find ways that we can make it easier for Canadians to start a small business and get involved in our local economy. So we're looking at repealing tax increases on small business investments and exempting spouses from the increases on small business dividends. We're also looking at ways to simplify our tax system and the CRA so that it's easier and simpler for Canadians to understand how they are running their business and what they have to pay in taxes. And then also reducing federal regulations for small businesses by at least 25%. So we have a lot of federal regulations around small businesses in Canada. It does make it very difficult, and I think this is going to be a great measure to encourage and incentivize people to want to start their own small businesses. And that's important. Small businesses are the backbone of our communities. That's how people get employment. That's how money gets spent locally in our local economies here. So I think these are all really good measures that we can actually see an impact from. We'll even be making a ministerial position out of it and having a minister that's reporting directly to the Prime Minister on these efforts to reduce these federal regulations and simplify things. We're also going to be regulating that ministers are supporting innovation, economic growth, and global competitiveness. And there's a lot also in there around having a rural perspective, which is really important for our riding here, as we are a rural set of rural communities. So having that rural perspective on all the cabinet decisions, which also plays into the small business aspects of it, and ensuring that rural communities like ours are receiving our fair share of infrastructure spending and that we have a budget that is specific to us. Obviously, that's something that we have felt significantly over the last few years, is that we don't get as much federal money for infrastructure spending, and so that would reallocate to make sure that it was more equitable and our communities aren't suffering at the expense of the larger ones. So I think that these are all really important measures that we can take to make life easier and more affordable for everyday Canadians and to encourage small business development, because that should be the role of government. They should be encouraging and incentivizing that, not regulating and making things more and more difficult.
So there could be a cut for small business.
We'll probably have things to say about it, but we have to know that a large percentage of small businesses are actually just ways for wealthier Canadians to save on their taxes.
We're just middle class people trying to make a living and get ahead. So thanks for watching, guys, and have a good weekend.